Good morning. You're listening to the BLAINESWORLD show. Heard
I
each
don't see a
Wednesday.
word record.
It's up top. You don't have to say anything, Steve. You are
Okay.
being recorded.
Okay,
And
good.
thank you for checking with me. But you listen to the show. Heard each Wednesday here on WPVM in Asheville, North Carolina. You can also listen online at WPVMFM.org and watch on WPVM's Facebook page. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield. I'm here in my Zoom studio in beautiful downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And each week we focus on the Asheville theater scene, as well as on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to welcome Steve Daughter, I'll say a longtime friend of mine. Steve, welcome aboard.
Thank you, Blaine.
And
Appreciate you having me here.
Steve's not only a longtime friend, he's also a high school classmate of mine. What was it? The class of 1932, was it?
Yeah, maybe for you.
Okay, he laughs. I took a couple of years longer than you did to Steve to graduate. And Steve, I should mention, has been writing and speaking about motivated strengths and the impact it has on individual, team, and organizational productivity, effectiveness, and work satisfaction for over 45 years. He's the author of several articles. The book Managing Yourself, Managing Others, Learn how to improve effectiveness, productivity, and work satisfaction, which is 3 editions. He also wrote the book Lessons from Life, 4 Keys to Living with More Meaning, Purpose, and Success. And see, I know you've done a whole bunch of other stuff, but let me ask you this. When we went to high school in the, I guess, late 60s, we went to high school, graduated 67. Did you always know you wanted to be a writer?
No, not at all. I was an absolutely horrendous student. So, as one high school friend of ours said, he said, I thought you'd always be playing basketball in the playground for the rest of your life. So, I thought I'd grow up to be a croupier in a casino.
Well, you tell a great story in one of the books. It was how your life turned around, and I just love the story because I knew you in high school, and we both kind of floundering around. I played maybe some basketball somewhere along the lines with you. I wasn't much of an athlete, but all of a sudden, and then you went to college. And then all of a sudden, kind of things changed around for you at some point in time. What brought about that change?
Well, in order to really appreciate this story, let me take 2-3 minutes to explain kind of what I did, because it really ties into this story, and it's kind of an important backdrop.
And it's a great story, by the way.
Okay, thank you. I believe that people are either born with or they develop early in life a natural way of doing things. So if you think about it, Blaine, when you get up in the morning, there's some things you absolutely love to do, whether it's paid work or avocational, and other stuff you just as soon put on the bottom of the pile. And so if your work involved all those things you absolutely love to do, chances are you'd be more satisfied and successful. And if your job involved all the things that are opposite the nature of that, or that you didn't like to do, it would be difficult to be really highly motivated. Chances are you wouldn't be satisfied, and it would be more difficult to be successful. And so the question is, how do you get at this stuff, what I call, natural talent or natural ability or motivated strengths? And what I did for 45 years is I asked people to make a list of moments in their life where they did something they enjoyed doing and felt that they did well. For lack of a better word, we'll call it an achievement. And then I interviewed them on those achievements, maybe 10, 15 or so of those achievements, in an attempt to find out what was happening that was giving them this tremendous sense of satisfaction and success. And what I would see is that the person had a pattern that began early in their life and stay very, very constant throughout their life. So for example, an innovator would be always trying to innovate. An organizer would be always trying to organize. A performer would be always trying, to perform. And so what I'd say to people, if this is the stuff, the kind of thing that's given you this tremendous sense of satisfaction and success in the past, you ought to look for work that allows you to do that. And what I would say to companies is, if you're going to pay this person $50, $60, $100, $200,000, $300,000 a year, you might as well put them in a role that plays into their natural strengths. Okay, and now I'm going to go back to that story, in a second. And so when I would work with people, I'd help them to understand their strengths, but I'd also to help them understand that a weakness is often nothing more than the flip side of a strength. So if you take somebody who's inventive and creative and an out-of-the-box thinker, and you put, which is great, right? Great abilities to have. But if you put them in a job where they need to implement something exactly the way it was laid out, their boss is going to say to them all the time, why don't you just do it the way I'm telling you to do it? And they're going to be saying, you don't understand, if we do this, we do that, okay? So that's what I did for a living. It was really helping to understand these natural strengths and natural gifts, okay? Now back to the story of what happened in high school. Well, I really had great difficulty as a student. I was left back, I failed, I scored in the low percentiles. When I went to in sixth grade, they called my parents and me in, and they said to me, we're not moving them into seventh grade, you're not going to middle school. And there was some conversation, and then they decided to say, you'll move on to the next grade, seventh grade, conditionally, as long as you do well. So I moved into middle school, conditionally, got into high school, and everything totally fell apart. I would go into class, in my freshman year, and basically what I did is I put my head on the desk, and I put my head on my arm, and basically I slept through classes. And I failed everything in my freshman year. Went to summer school, and I think I failed everything in summer school also. So in my sophomore year, I said, this can't go on like this. And so I just played a game in my head to stay awake, And what I would do is I would pick a number like 2,622, and I would sit in class and I would count in my head, 1, 2. And what I would try to do is have the number, the clock, and the number I was counting hit simultaneously. So it became like a challenge, and that helped to keep me awake. Other things that I would do is I would try to do an adrenaline rush, kind of where I would do something funny. So I remember once they were reading Huckleberry Finn in class, and I took my shoes and my socks off, and I walked to the front of the classroom. I was frequently in the principal's office. I cut school a lot.
Well, Steve, if I can jump in, Steve,
Yeah.
I think you forgot to mention something else too, though, is another fact that you had trouble staying up in school because you were out at night doing other stuff.
Yeah, I was playing basketball at night. I was playing basketball with the college kids. I was gambling a lot. And so I became very, very, I'll call it successful or competent in basketball, sports, and in gambling. Okay. And that's how my high school proceeded. I went to summer school, I passed some things. And then the odd thing is I was left back, but they ended up giving me 2 credits for English, an English class. And when I mentioned it to my wife who taught, she said, there's no way, you can't, you have to take 4 years of English in high school. So I got my transcript, and there it was. It basically said special circumstances or something. So I think they wanted me out of school. I picked a college out of the back of a magazine, went out to Nebraska. By the way, I never did homework, never studied. I was almost like Joe Ferrone in Up the Down Staircase. I kind of had a chip on the shoulder. I'd sit like this. I always sat in the back of the classroom whenever I could, in the second row because that way I could fall asleep and teacher wouldn't necessarily see me. Went to school in Nebraska, quit after the first semester, came back, and my sister, I was working in a supermarket, and my sister called me and said, I just enrolled you at Mohawk Valley Community College. And she said, my brother is not going to college. And so I show up in Utica, New York at Mohawk Valley Community College. And the first class was with this teacher, Steve Mocco. And I get emotional sometimes when I tell this story. So
great story, though, please.
To tear up, So I'm sitting in his class, and again, I'm in the back of the row, back of the second row, and he gives the class something to read, and I read it like with everybody else. And he says, what's the story mean or the poem mean? And people are giving their opinions, and he's just accepting all these opinions. And I just thought it was a lot of malarkey. And so I decided to ask him the most asinine thing that I could ask him what I thought the story meant, you know, and I don't remember what it was. And he said, you know, to me and to the class, that's possible, Mr. Darter. Why do you think so? And I just kind of stumbled through an answer. You know, I got caught, but I, you know, faked it. And then he gave us assignments. A Tuesday, Thursday class gave us an assignment. And I read the things that he assigned. And then when I showed up in the Thursday class, you know, with the other students, he stood up there and he said, I don't feel like teaching today. Would anyone like to teach? And there I was in the back of the you know, the row. And there was a part of me that wanted to stand up and teach. But like I had no success in school. Everything was again gambling and sports, mostly basketball. So like everybody else, I didn't say anything. Again, he asked, would anyone like to teach today? And again, nobody. And then he walked down the aisle. He stood in front of me and he said, Mr. Dart, how would you like to teach today? And I broke out in this unbelievable cold sweat. My heart was pounding. There's a part of me that wanted to do it, and another part knew, no way should I do this. But I stood up, and I'm really good at faking bravado. And I walked to the front of the class, you know, with this bravado, and I stood in front of the class, and I said, what does this story or poem or whatever mean? And people gave their opinions, and I imitated him. I paced left and right, you know, saying that's possible, this, and I was alive. I was unbelievable how alive I was. There was
By the way,
no.
do you put you on the spot? Do you remember the story?
Oh, no idea.
Oh,
no idea. And so again, I'm alive. My mind's flying, different things coming into my head. No reason to sleep in class. No reason to count. And then when the class is over, he asked me to come back to his office, and he said to me, I looked at your record and I see something in you.
wow.
And he changed my life. And let me just take another minute to complete the loop here, back to the idea of natural strengths. So I decided I wanted to participate in class. And I participated in his class, and that was good. And then I decided to participate in a history class. And I decided to move from the back of the row to the front. And I was sitting in the front row in this history class, and I'm listening, and all of a sudden I could feel my eyes closing, and my head start to fall. And I started to look really at him intensely, the professor. And I found that as I did that, as I looked at him, he would like talk to me. And I felt a little bit of an adrenaline rush that helped a little bit, but it wasn't enough to overcome this intense tiredness that I was feeling. And I was thinking, okay, tomorrow I go back to the back of the classroom because this is not going to work. But now I have to figure out a way to stay awake. And so I raised my hand and I asked a question. And when I asked the question, I became alive. And I realized something at that point, is that by asking questions, I could basically influence and to some extent control the direction a class took. And the idea of being an influencer and sparking direction really was intoxicating for me. And it kept me awake. So I moved to classes, you know, raising hands. And then I discovered that the more knowledge and information I had, the better I was able to influence people or respond to people who had questions. And then learning took on a whole new meaning for me. And I realized at that point in my life that I wanted to be in a position where I could have influence and impact on people. And so his recognizing something in me and giving me that opportunity and doing it in such a way where it was difficult to say no. And just to close the loop, Blaine, if you could bear with me. So after I wrote this story, and I think before the book was published, I got in touch with the now president of Mohawk Valley Community College. And I told I didn't think they'd give me his address, you know, but I didn't even know if he was alive, this Steve Mocco, because he'd be in his 80s, late 80s. And they told me that obviously they couldn't give me his number, but he was alive. And they said that they would get in touch with his daughter. And about a week later, his daughter contacted me, and I told her who I was, and I sent her the story. She sent it to her father, And I've now had 3 or 4 conversations with Steve Mocco, and he remembered me. And it was like, he's like my Mr. Tuesdays with Maury.
Oh yeah, exactly. Well,
so that's the story, and that's what so for 45 years, what I've been doing is mostly executives of corporations, helping them to be more effective at work, helping companies in team building situations, people coming together, performance issues or conflict resolution, a lot of evaluations and stuff. So, but anyway, that's the story you make reference to.
okay, Steve, a couple
Sorry
of things.
about being so long.
No, I love the story, as you know, and just a couple of things about it. Number one, I'm surprised as you tell the story, and even listening to you now, that you never became a teacher.
Well, I did. I taught in 2 graduate schools.
Okay, you have told me that, but
Okay.
I would have thought that would have been the thing that would have gotten you. You saw the difference hit in his life. That I would have thought you said, hey, I like teaching. This is kind of cool.
Well, I like doing the thing that, you get into the subtlety of what I refer to as a motivated abilities pattern. One of the things about me is I like, my partner used to say to me, you're like splash and dash. You come in, you make your splash, you provide your counsel or advice, and then you dash. So being a consultant fit well. The idea of having an obligation of 5 days a week showing up probably wouldn't fit my nature. But to be invited into a classroom, or to be invited, like I was thinking about you today, and I was thinking about a radio show, and I was thinking the dread of the thought of every day, you know what I mean, or a certain set of hours doing this, and how difficult it would be to my nature to have that sense of obligation. But appearing on a show and talking or giving a presentation or stepping into someone's life when they're at a crossroads in their life and helping them make a critical decision about their career or their life, it really highly motivates me.
So I want to mention something else based on what you just said there too. Yeah. First of all, I should mention on the radio show, I don't know if you can find it where you live, but I only do this like once a week. So it's kind of cool. I don't have to do it every day, because right. I agree with you. I don't know if I'd like to be doing it every day. But the other thing, I just want to share another thing you just mentioned, which might be able to interest to viewers or listeners. And that is, you did something which is really cool. You got in touch with your former teacher. And I encourage people to do this all the time. If something moves you, either a teacher or a book, for example, I write, Steve, at every book I write, I might, every book I read, I might write half the authors. And what's amazing is half the time I'll get a response, and so just as a way to network or make contacts or explore ideas, I'm encouraging folks, if they hear Steve Daughter on the radio or Facebook Live today, or if they read a book, drop them a note, because it's a great way to communicate with a person. And I had the one other thing I'll add is I had the same relationship with a college professor as you did. I was in touch with him for 45 years. And every time I come to New Jersey, I meet him, and it's my mentor, my friend, meant a lot to me. And then he had just a year ago, he had the audacity to die. I was very sad, so I can't be in touch with him anymore. Yeah. What a great relationship I had with him, almost like you said, the Tuesdays with Maury thing. So just, if people make a difference, let them know it after the fact. Yeah,
I agree. And tell you, I'll sometimes email people, who wrote a book or did something and they don't respond. And my reaction is, I can't believe they don't respond, because I respond to everybody who emails me, even if, there's really nothing to connect about. I just said that's not something I do, but to leave somebody hanging out there, and not respond just seems just a horrible thing to do. So.
You'll get a kick out of this too, because you probably know who he is. Lawrence J. Peter, the Peter Principle. Lawrence J. Peter. So it's the same point you said, that I read his book, made a big influence on my life, and I wrote him a letter, and he wrote me back, and we had a correspondence for about 10 years until he also died.
Wow.
But it's really cool to be in touch with him. My marketing guru, Murray Rayful from New Jersey, same thing too. Read a book. We were in touch for 30 years. It's just amazing how they can reach out to people, and they won't, as you said, come back to you all the time, but sometimes they will, which is kind of nice.
But You're absolutely right. But you would be someone who would do that
Right, right,
because, again, as I observe you, a communicator looks to communicate.
right,
So
right.
you
Good
have your
point.
BLAINESWORLD publication. You taught. You got this encouragement thing going. You got the radio show. So if I had 4 or 5 people in front of me and said one of these would be contacting authors and professors, and you know, and
Good point.
I would say, if I looked at your achievements, I say this guy's likely to do it, as opposed to the other, the other people.
So anyway, fast forward then a little bit. So then you've been in this industry for a whole bunch of years,
Yes.
and then what got your idea then to put it all together and put it in writing?
Well, for the first book, I had hired somebody who was an associate dean at a graduate school in organizational development, and we hired her to build us a series of workshops around our motivational pattern process and technology because there was a demand for it. And she came to me, she said, we really need a book. And because the book that we had that we would have been using was written in the late 1950s by the person who founded people management and this whole SEMA process. And the language from the book in the 1950s was really not appropriate. And so I was going to kind of redo that book, but it really didn't make that sense. But I took the structure, and quite honestly, Blaine, in 3 or 4 weeks, I wrote, oh, here it is. I wrote this book, in 3 or 4 weeks, which is now, it's like you had mentioned, in its 3rd edition. So that was written really to enhance this workshop and explain our process and our technology, and it provided things, where she could say, okay, read pages 14 to 21, or do this, or go here, for reference. Second book was a lot different, but that was the first book. That's how that came about. Did you want to hear about the second one?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you, first of all, do you have the second book there in front of you? Can you just hold
Sure.
it up? Now hold it up for a second, so we'll take it. So
called Lessons from Life.
I'm trying to think. That's the one I read and reviewed. Is that correct?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That was. I'll praise it, Steve, and then you can talk about it. But that was the book. You went there. A whole bunch of chapters in there, right? And you told, in essence, a large part of it was you telling the story of your life. Is that correct?
Yeah. Let me tell you what.
I loved it. You go ahead.
Thank you, Blaine. I appreciate that. So in 2002, my parents got very, very old. They were in their young 90s, and I moved them into a nursing home, and I cleaned out their apartment. And if anyone's ever had that experience, you start discovering things. And what I found were a whole bunch of writings that they wrote to each other, poems and stories, in the first couple of when they first met, in the first couple of years of their marriage. And I also found my mother's diary that she had kept for about a year and a half. And I read it, and what a trip to get into the minds of your parents when they're 18 and 19 and 20 years old. And I said to myself, I think I'm going to write some stories, about my life, and I'm just going to hide them away. And then, as bizarre as this sounds, then when I die, my kids and maybe my grandkids would find these stories, and they go, oh, wow, I didn't know this about Grandpa, and give them the same experience that I gave, to myself. And so I was writing these stories over the years, and this started in 2002, and the book wasn't published until 2018. So it's a 16-year time period here. And I'm writing these stories, and in my consulting with people, every once in a while, someone would be dealing with an issue. So, for example, that Steve Mako story, I was doing a workshop, a team building thing with these executives, and an executive woman came up to me afterwards, and she said, about how discouraged her husband was, who was teaching math, because he feels he is having no impact, on his students. By the way, Steve Mako had no idea the impact he had on me, until I spoke to him and I wrote the story. And so I said, I'm going to share a story with you. So I emailed it to her, and she said, you've turned my husband's life around.
Wow.
And so I started sharing other stories. Someone had a troubled kid, and people were giving me a lot of feedback. And then I sat down with a mentor of mine, Art Miller, again, and he was the person who kind of founded people management in this process that we use. And I was telling him about this, and he said to me, he said, you're not going to want this just to be for your grandkids, because he said the way you're put together, you want to impact on people. You really need it to be out there to put it into a book. And so that's how that started. And then I ended up working with a senior editor from Random House. Someone had sent him some excerpts, and he really loved the writing. And so he was working with me, and he said, you have no structure to the book. And so it took several years of kind of working this, and I ended up with the structure of, 4 keys to living with more meaning, purpose, and success. The first title was going to be Lessons for Life. The second title was going to be An Evolving Soul. The third title was going to be What is the Purpose of My Life? And then I envisioned a cover where the my was crossed off, and handwritten in script would be the word your. And then it was Lessons from Life, Living with More Meaning and Purpose. And then I added the word success at the end. And I think if I had to do it over again, I'd probably do What is the Purpose of Your Life, My Life, with the words your. I like that the best, but I got talked out of it.
Well, what's so great about the book, Steve, I think, and a thought for any of our listeners as well, is your point is you can share your stories now, rather than waiting for 40 years or something.
Yeah.
And it's like, I always felt bad because my dad was a pretty good writer, and I read 1 or 2 of his stories and they're brilliant, but that was it. I always wished he had put down more in writing to share with me, because I wanted to learn more about his life, and what I think, what's really great what you did on this is the idea, not only the stories of your life, which I loved, and I'll encourage listeners, and you'll mention how to get the book, Steve, in a second, but you want to read about an interesting guy, read this book, because I kind of grew up with you in some of it, but I didn't know half of it. I know 9/10 of the story. And my all-time favorite, and then we're going to have to end this segment. My all-time favorite, I'll let you give a 1-minute version of how you were working as a kid at a beach club, and you didn't have a license, but that didn't affect you at all.
No. Well, that's the bad stuff that I did as a kid. Some people read the book and they said, man, I thought I was bad. I ended up getting a job at a beach club. I talked them into giving me a job, and
I loved it.
Running a parking lot, and I didn't have a driver's license, but I got in an accident parking the car. So.
But they didn't ask for the driver's license?
No, I did it backing a car up. So
I'm saying, had you got the job though, you didn't have to have a driver's license?
They never asked me for it. You need to understand that, some names for you. Mark Milberg,
right,
and Scott Antonelli, they were Cabana boys, and Jeff Snyder was the lifeguard. So, they probably opened the door for me, and I got in, and they needed somebody to park cars, and I was the only person, and I parked cars. And
Steve, 2 questions. One, if anybody wants to get either two books, and we can show them up in the air if you just hold them up briefly.
Yeah.
But if folks want to get the 2 books, what's the best bet?
Probably the best bet is going to Amazon and just putting in my name or the titles. And there's a lot of reviews in there on Amazon, and you can get a real sense of them.
Okay.
Or you can just send me an email. I'll respond. I respond to everybody. Okay. And my email address is easy. It's S for Steve, M for Mark, which is my middle name. So smdarter, DARTER @gmail.com.
And Steve said he will respond, because I think that's how we got in touch again, that either you wrote me or I wrote you, and we've been in touch now the last couple of years. It was a treat. Yeah. Next time we get to Jersey, we'll have to try to get together again. But anyway, I want to thank you for being my guest this first half hour on the Blaine's World Show. As always, a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully in the next couple of years.
Thanks, Blaine. You made it very easy.
Okay, buddy. Good speaking to you. You be well. Okay, I'll have Steve's going to disappear. I'm going to try to find my other guest if he's listening, or I'm going to have Steve disappear. I want to welcome our second guest. As I welcome our second guest, he's going to be joining us in just a second. I want to mention that folks are listening to, there he is. Bob's going to be with us in a second. Hey, Bob. I'll be with you in 1 second. I want to mention to folks that they're listening to WPVM, and our mission is to foster community through programming that cultivates dialogue to inform and entertain. The station provides the medium for artists, business, community leaders, and nonprofits. and listeners are invited to help support WPVM's efforts by making a tax-deductible contribution. You can do so by going to the website, wpvmfm.org, and looking at the donate option in the upper right-hand side. It's now my pleasure to introduce our second guest, and he is Bob Hinkle. Welcome aboard, Bob.
Hey, how you doing?
Okay, and Bob, you can also say hello to all your fans and friends in Facebook world. You can wave to them.
All three of them. Okay.
Okay, great. Well, you say that, but Bob's been a guest on the show before, and we didn't have Facebook Live working, so I'm pretty sure it's working today. I should mention that Bob is the owner, manager, the booker, among other things, at White Horse Black Mountain, and he also has 50 years plus a background in music as a performer, executive producer, executive, you name it. That's been Bob, executive of a record company, CEO, writer, etc. Bob, I should ask, what haven't you done?
I can't remember.
Exactly. The list is so long. Bob, I knew you through your story. You told me that you started out originally. You were a performer. Is that correct? You were
That's
a musician.
Right.
What got you into that?
I'm sorry, say it again.
What got you into being a performer, a musician?
I remember the first memory that I have was 4 years old, sitting in a green rocking chair in West Asheville, North Carolina, listening to WWNC. There was a show on Saturday night called Sweet Corn Serenade. And it had a variety of music on it. And I listened to it. And the more I listened to it, the more I said to myself, I don't know what that is or how to do it, but I want to do it. And that, I think, was the very beginning.
So how did you start? Did you take lessons? Did somebody teach you how to do stuff?
Not really. The very first thing I did, so some of you who are old enough will remember this, there was a radio show called Arthur Godfrey's Breakfast Club.
Okay, I've heard of it, yeah.
Arthur Godfrey marketed a ukulele with the buttons on it. So if you pushed a button, you got a G chord, push another button, you got a C chord. Got one of those for some present. And it was empowering, even though it could only play 4 chords, it was still empowering. So I got a regular ukulele, and then I nagged and got a baritone ukulele. And finally, when I was, I think, about 6½, I looked out the window one night and my father was coming down the hill carrying a guitar case, and I knew I was in green fields at that point. And that was my Sears $29 silver tone guitar.
Do you still have that?
I don't. Unfortunately, it was stolen.
Oh,
Which I did.
So sad.
Strings were way off the neck, so it was hard to play.
Wow. So you're 6½ years old. That's your first guitar. How'd you get from there to becoming a pro musician?
God, well, you turn you blind your eyes to reality. First of all, you have to be able to say, I want to do this no matter what, and then you just take advantage of whatever opportunities you possibly can. And if you can't find them outside your door, you make them up. You go for them. I every time I could play, I did. Every time I could do anything about music, I did it. If I could help other people do music, I did that. Gosh, and the detail.
Do you remember your first gig you ever had? First paid gig?
First paid gig?
Yeah.
That's a whole different story. Let me think about that. Let's see. First gig.
In high school, were you in a band or?
I was in junior high school.
Junior, great.
I was playing the trumpet in those days. And it was the prom, whatever they call the prom in junior high school. And the highlight for me was that I stood up in the balcony, and while the king and queen of the prom were dancing around and around, I stood up in the balcony with a spotlight on me and played Blue Moon, the song Blue Moon. And that was, one of those things that said, yeah, Bob, you're doing the right thing. Let's go music, let's go.
And you got paid for that, is that correct?
Not a lot, but yes, got paid.
Now, do you still have the first dollar? You frame it. I don't see it in your office.
As a, what is that? What does that make me? An 11-year-old, 12-year-old? You get $1, I'll keep it. And I
That's cool. So then you went through school and you were in different bands and stuff. Was that your thing?
Yes, and with all sorts of different bands all the way through high school. I think maybe highlighted by, I was in a band called the Royal Roulettes, who used to play at the Pines at Royal Pines just about every weekend. And I think it was either the first or one of the first actually racially integrated bands in Western North Carolina. And many weekends we would play for the folks that were at the Pines from 8 to 11 or whatever. And we'd get in the cars and drive to Asheville and play gigs for a largely Black audience from like 1 to 4 or whatever. So it was quite a learning curve, I'll tell you. Really something. Enjoyed it.
And then, so you went from there then, and you told me off the air, you actually recorded some songs and then you're telling a great story off the air about your first, I guess, record, or tell the story you were telling to Steve and I about your Sam Goody experience.
Oh, well, skipping a lot of years and moving me into the world of being the head of artist and repertoire for a record company, who also asked me to make a record, which was very nice of them. And I did, and the record was released. It was called Ali Magus, and it was my only real solo record, although I made others. And it went out and sort of did kind of okay, got good reviews, sold some records. I don't really know how many, but 40, 50,000 maybe. And, but then it waned, it sort of had its peak and waned. And about 6 months after that, I walked into a Sam Goody's and saw my LP on sale in the cutout bin for $3.98.
So
it's a real deflation.
Now, do you still have that record?
Sure.
I mean, do you ever listen to it?
I don't listen to it very much. Other people ask me to listen to it. And
I love it. Or, you're giving me an idea. I'm very serious about this. So I assume it's not on YouTube. Is that correct?
No.
Because I'd love to hear it. Or even, people do that. They sometimes just play the music, and listen to it. Food for thought, though, Bob. But boy, I'd really love to hear it sometime. And that's the way to do it. Just make it.
Well, what's happened between 1970 and now? That's what it was.
Well, a couple of changes. So you were doing recordings, but you were also then becoming an executive in the recording industry.
Yes.
Talk about that. How long did you do that for?
Well, gosh, let's see. Started in 69. I was doing it basically from, I don't know, 40 years, 45 years. But it was all interspersed with still playing in bands and doing and performing music. But I did both. I mean, I literally did both.
Out of all the stuff you've done, and we'll move up into White Horse in a second, but do you have a favorite thing out of all the stuff you've done? Was there a favorite job or gig you ever had?
I would have to say during my years of managing or co-managing the Jay Giles Band, we were fortunate enough to go to Europe with Rolling Stones for a summer and play all those gigs. And that was, that you don't get to do that every day. And it was really something. Very, very large audiences. It was the Rolling Stones. What can I say? It was a wild summer.
Did you also, were you able to maintain your hearing during that period of time, or
my hearing was already gone by then. So
was it really? Because
I had early. If you want to go back earlier, I was just after graduate. Didn't actually graduate yet, but after I left Chapel Hill and from school and went to New York, went immediately on tour for a number of weeks with a package tour that had our band, which was called the Good Earth Trio, open. Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels come second, and Wilson Pickett was the closer.
Wow.
So we would do our show, go down, change clothes, come back up and sing Mitch Ryder's background vocals while he was doing his thing. So I found myself standing about 5, 6 feet, 7 feet from Mitch Ryder's guitar player's amplifier, which was a Wurlitzer, something I can't remember, but it was a big amplifier that was very loud. And Dougie only knew 0 and 10. He didn't know anything in between in terms of volume. So I lost B flat and E flat pretty much for a while there, for a good long while. Came back, but not for a while.
And I guess people at the time didn't realize that was not the thing to do. You just accepted it as.
I think they did it anyway. Whatever they realized, they did it anyway.
So you were with those groups who were performing, and you were also managing. You also, what was it, Harry Chapin you were with?
And Harry Chapin and his brother Tom.
You managed them as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that must have been quite an experience, though. Or
it was. They broke the mold when they made Harry.
I mean, I don't know him, but just his music was just incredible. And you also, to come full circle, you've also had, right, I think it was you who had a Harry Chapin, you had a couple of Harry Chapin shows at your place? Or Chapin?
I did a Harry Chapin kind of retrospective, Bob Does Harry kind of a show,
Right.
or a full show, which was fun.
Well, then take it back to where we are now, not take it back, fast forward to White Horse Black Mountain. When did that start?
It's November the 8th, 2008.
Okay, yeah, I remember you had a big 10th anniversary party for that, right?
Yeah.
What brought you to White Horse and coming up with the idea of running a facility like that?
Well, I mean, back to something you asked me earlier, which was, what have you not done? And I realized that running a venue, which is something I hadn't done, it was a good thing to try. Anyway, I'd been in New York for 40 years, and I was just not doing the stuff that I used to do in the city. And I decided that 40 years was a long time to be anywhere, and wanted to come someplace different. And I have all the artistic progress that the Asheville and Black Mountain area has made over the years made it very appetizing to me. I really wanted to come down and check it out. Was very happy with what I saw, and took us a few months to get down here, but we got here.
Now that facility, was that building already in existence, or did you?
It was. The building was built in 1945 as a Jeep Willis dealership. Willis went out of business, and so it became a Chevy dealership for the McMurray family for a number of years. And it had a couple of less glamorous short lives in there. And then we found it in early 2008. And it's a good story, actually. The name came from a morning when my then wife, Kim, was upstairs meditating. Came downstairs and said, "Bob, what's a White Horse Black Mountain?" I said, "I don't know." She said, "Why?" She said, "Because it was in my head. I was meditating and just kept popping into my head." So I said, "I don't know. We'll look around, see if we see one." And about a few weeks later, we were in the office of Bob McMurray, who was the head of the Chamber of Commerce over here. And he had Googled me, I think, and found out I was a music business person. And he said, after we got through with that meeting, he said, "Come on, I want to show you something." And he showed us the current White Horse Black Mountain building, which was then owned by his father. And Kim and I were taken with the acoustics of it, because it's completely wood ceiling, and it's arched pretty significantly, which all warms the sound up, helps it a lot. So we were walking around looking at it, standing right where the bar is now, and then walked over to the big garage door, which is left over from a car dealership. And so she said to me, what do you think? Is this White Horse Black Mountain?" I was about to say, I don't know. I turned around and looked at the big door, and on the door, I swear, was a poster of 6 white horses running across a meadow.
Oh, wow.
We thought some things in life should not be ignored. And 6-7 months later, we were open.
Do you still have that poster?
Oh, yeah, of course. We had it refurbished.
Oh, is that, so that's the story. So you took it over, 6-7 months later, it opened. Do you remember your first show there?
Yes, it was a wonderful bluegrass show. I'll think of the guy's name in a minute.
Okay.
But it was a great show.
Okay, but as you think about it, it just kind of segues into what you do at White Horse Black Mountain, which is just incredible. But you present music, but it's certainly an eclectic type programming you run. Is that by design, or is that what you started doing day one?
That's the word. Eclectic is the word. There's very little that we don't do. And we do, of course, we do some rock and roll, not a whole lot really. We do a lot of Celtic, we do a lot of jazz, we do some classical, we do some plays, storytelling, pretty much you name it, we do it.
Was that the design when you opened it? That's what you're going to do?
If you'd asked me that, I would have said, "Wow, that's a good idea," and not quite had it in mind yet. But yeah, that's what's taken the ball and run with it.
Well, that's one of the things I think, Bob, you do, which is I'm grateful for. Hopefully, Western North Carolina as well. That if you want to see entertainment, somewhere along the line, you're going to see it at your place. It's like I said, the range of stuff you do. Like, talk a little bit about even what you're doing now. That your place is great to go to, but people aren't going to you right now because of COVID.
Right.
So talk about what you've done as a result then because of COVID. What are you now doing?
Well, very early on after the lockdown began, we started contemplating how we could do live streaming. I think we were just a tiny bit ahead of the curve. A lot of people weren't doing it when we started. But we decided to sort of delve into it, dig into it, get into it a little bit significantly. And we tooled up. We made a wonderful relationship with a company called Rad House Studios and Rebecca Hillgraves, who's fantastic. We did some changes to our physical plant so that we could accommodate it all. We started doing it, and our Christmas Eve live stream was our 50th one. We've done 50 of them now.
You're doing them, it seems like almost every week you're doing them. Is that the intent?
Pretty much.
And sometimes more than once a week. Sometimes I'll see a sort of Sunday afternoon show not too long ago.
Mm-hmm.
And Bob, just as a compliment to Rebecca, a compliment to you as well, those shows are really good because what's exciting about them, they feel live, they feel real, as opposed to what a lot of other people are putting out is like tape versions of stuff. It's just not the same as when you see it live. It's just beautifully done.
I think if you're going to do a live stream, you should do it live.
Yeah. Whereas other people tape it and, it's okay, but it's really feels super. And so the 51 shows, talk about some of the kinds of performers you've had in those 51 shows.
Wow.
Just give a range.
We had Daniel Weiser, who does a classical series with his company, Amici Music. We had David Lamont, of course, who's local and a good friend. We have had Ashley Heath, who's a wonderful, terrific singer. The Riccardis, who are satirists.
By the way, just to stop on that one, that I never heard of the Riccardis before, but I read the description and it sounded like it'd really be interesting. And what a fun show that was. They were really great. I guess the point I'm trying to make is if people give some things a chance, they'll be pleasantly surprised. That was a great show. Yeah.
No one is safe when the Riccardis are around. The first order.
Yeah, great show. So then you had my friend BJ Lee. BJ was at your place.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
As well. And then again, I think what I would encourage people to do is check out your schedule, White Horse Black Mountain schedule. So find some stuff they might not even think they might like, but give it a shot. And you mentioned the guy's name, but he performed with Franklin Keel. And that was a pleasant surprise that I never thought I'd want to see an afternoon of classical music. And it was really good.
Daniel Weiser has been doing Amici Music stuff with us for 10 years, about once a month for 10 years. And the first thing that we did, the very first one, when we were just trying to introduce ourselves to the whole community, was we did something with some women singers. I think 2 or 3 women singers, they were operatic singers. One of whom was my then wife. And there was this old gentleman in his bib overalls and his baseball hat sitting at the bar. And I looked at him and couldn't imagine that he was liking this very much. But after the ladies sang and the music was played, he came over to me and he said, I didn't think I liked classical music, but I tell you what, you set me down at a bar, and you hear these lovely ladies sing like that. I think I like it all right. And that was me saying, okay, we've done one right thing. We're in the right business.
Well, no, but you've done that with me a lot too, because stuff I never thought I'd be interested in.
Good.
Like the Riccardis, you mentioned the classical show. I'll see it, and say, like you said, that's really kind of interesting. It's kind of good. And what makes it so outstanding, I think, is in large part the cinematography that you're doing with the shows, but also it just feels very intimate. Even when I see a show at your place, because again, I think you probably agree with this. When people are actually in the place, there's no real bad seat there because it's
right.
It feels intimate. How many seats in the place?
The fire department says 215.
Is it? Yeah, but so there are 215 sometimes, which is really exciting.
Not enough, but sometimes.
Okay, sometimes. So the plan is, we'll be continuing the series for the foreseeable future.
We will continue it until the cows come home. I think that the live streaming idea is one that's caught. I think it's not going to go away even when people can get to hear music live again. I think it has its own reality, its own place in the pie of things. And so we're going to continue to do it. We're all set up for it. So,
If people want to see what's coming up at your place, what's the best bet usually?
whitehorseblackmountain.com.
Okay, and they'll find you. You're also pretty active on Facebook as well.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Is that correct? And so moving forward, what are some of the plans for the next, say, 6 months? Do you have anything in the works?
Planning, of course, is harder than usual because no one knows when we'll be able to have people live bodies in the place again. So you have to sort of close your eyes, and it's like trying to hit the piñata with a stick when you're blindfolded. You sort of have to close your eyes and pick a date and hope for the best. You've got to have a time when you sort of convert from the budget that allows you to live stream only and the one that allows you to do both. And you have to put a stick in there to say when it is. So I don't know. I can tell you that we'll make a bit of a splash whenever it is. And I hope, just straight out of the air with no direct line to the gods that be, I would say we're 3, 4, 5 months away probably from a real live audience.
Well,
There may be some increments in there, but
well, the nice thing about what you're doing though is a lot of it could be converted. I imagine, like if you line up a live stream concert, and then by 4 months from now we get the okay to open up, you could just have live stream, but just make it open to people instead.
That's right.
It is kind of exciting. If somebody wants to perform at your place, and we should mention this as well, because you've certainly provided a venue for a lot of people, who never performed in Western North Carolina before. Do people come up to you and say they want to perform at your place?
They do. People who've known me in my former life get in touch with me. The people in the industry, like managers and agents and stuff, are willing to acknowledge I'm still alive, and they'll call me. But now, and it used to be in the early days that I was having to reach out a lot and find people to come and play. And these days it's a little easier because people know we're here now. We're a little familiar and we have a little bit of a reputation. So they're calling me more than I'm having to call them, although it works both ways still.
But can people call you or send you an email and ask you to be considered?
What I need to see is something in print, something that says who the person is, what they're about, what they do. As many photos as they can send me online is fine, and some representative of their music, whatever they think it ought to be, which can come right to the email. And it takes me a little while because I get a fair number. It takes me a little while to get to stuff, but I will get to it, and at least give you the courtesy of a reply.
One of the things I guess has changed in your lifetime, certainly mine as well, is the idea, because there's now YouTube, that people can show their music or let you see the music. Can you tell if you want to have somebody there by seeing a YouTube clip? Does that work?
Yep, I've done it a number of times. You absolutely can. I mean, first of all, I know my own audience, and so I know what kind of music they would like. And then I also have a feeling from the same source that this particular artist, this particular rendition of that music might fit the bill as well. And then it's a question of talking to the artist or whoever their representative is, finding out something about them. Are they okay to deal with personally? Are they nice people? If they're not nice people, are they worth it anyway? At that point, I will have spent a little time with probably delved into them a little bit more and a little more research on my own. And sometimes I'll ask somebody else whose tastes I trust, what do they think? But somewhere in there comes a decision. It's all a little bit ethereal, I guess, but I don't know, they used to pay me to do it and now they don't.
It's interesting thinking out loud about how many different shows I've seen at your place over the years. And one of the classic ones I remember, and who would have thunk, was I saw a puppet show, at your place. And who would think that, I'd want to see a puppet show? But you know which one I'm talking about? The one, it was couple of years ago.
Are you talking about the adult one?
Yeah, the adult
Father's
one,
Dreams or whatever? Yeah, that was brilliant.
Yeah, it was what was the name of it again? Do you remember? Or was
I
it about
think it's
story?
My Father's Dreams, or
It was brilliant. Yeah, it was, a person wrote a play and then produced it and live puppets.
and
And
she's a brilliant puppeteer as well. Yeah.
yeah, it was a great story too. But, I would have never thought that I want to come see an adult puppet show.
But she spent, I'm going to remember her name too in a minute, but she
Me
spent
too.
some time working for Jen Henson.
Exactly, yeah.
And is just a wonderful puppeteer.
Yeah, name escapes me too, but I had it on my show as well. And fascinating, that she did the puppet show. Out of all the shows you've done, do you remember one as being like the most unusual show you've ever put on?
Most unusual. Well, I'll give you a couple of unusuals. In the early days of White Horse, we had an Armenian singer on. It was the middle of August. It was very hot. But she was brilliant. She had everyone's attention. Even the people who normally complain weren't complaining. But everybody was sweating profusely because we didn't have air conditioning. And brave soul that she was, she said, "I want to teach you an Armenian folk dance." And I think she meant she was going to show it on the stage.
Right.
What happened was the audience decided they wanted to do it. We were packed. There was a line of people all holding hands and doing this basic steps to this dance, went all the way around our room, which if you've seen it, it's pretty good sized. It was completely moving because the lyrics and stuff to the song were touching. That's one.
By the way, just on that too, one of the fun things about your place too is that some people, including me, tend to get up and dance, to just the music. It's just fun. Okay. And you got to kind of find corner to get into, but you can find space. It's just fun to, you don't say you can't do it. So people just get up and start dancing both in the front and the back. And that's kind of one of the fun things going to your place.
We do have a dance floor, and
right.
It is used reasonably well by the Asheville Jazz Orchestra, who comes about once a month. They're really good. They're a really wonderful band. Every once in a while, we'll have a dance specialty kind of a performance, which we're happy to do.
Bob, one more show that comes to mind is one that you'll kind of always remember. Yeah.
It was a show by a kind of basically a vaudeville group. They're local, called 40 Fingers and a Missing Tooth.
One of my favorites. Love them. Yeah.
Well, if you've seen them,
many times.
One of the highlights of their show is they get some poor sucker, in the case of their show is me, to stand up on the stage, and they go way off to the wings of the stage on both sides, and put a carrot in your mouth, just an average size carrot, and they'll stand over and throw these big massive knives back and forth to each other, and as the segment goes on, they get closer and closer and closer until they cut the carrot with the knives, and that means that these knives were only about 4 or 5 inches from my face. So that was memorable, to say the least. They did cut the carrot, and I survived. So.
And I've been there too. And Bob, what you forgot to mention is that's when you had the long beard, and now it's just a short beard.
It wasn't me that did it, though. I did it myself. It was voluntary.
I thought the knives did it. Bob, as we close, let me just ask you to repeat. If folks want to find out more about your place or see what's doing virtually, also hopefully live, best bet is to do what?
Go to the website, whitehorseblackmountain.com. If you want to email us, it's whitehorseblackmtn@gmail.com.
Okay, I'd like to thank you, Bob, for being my guest the second half hour on the BLAINESWORLD show. Steve Daughter, my guest on the first half hour. Hope to see you in person, sooner rather than later. I'd also like to thank my producer, Amy Prisnash, and having everybody join me here next Wednesday at 9 a.m. here on WPVM in Asheville, North Carolina. You can also listen online at WPVMFM.org and watch on WPVM's Facebook page. And I'd like to thank you, Bob, again for being my guest, and hope to see you sooner rather than later. Okay.
Thank you, Blaine.
Okay, you be well. Thanks.
Bye.
Just turn this off.